Saints Row, 2011's best game, Saints Row the Third.
Agreed.
2011's pretty good game.
2011's greatest, the best, award-winning.
Okay, we all right. We know what's good about Saints Row the Third.
Yeah,
the part that is the game. How is that part?
They did that pretty good.
How's that part?
So they remastered it again, and so it's, here we are 9 years later or whatever, trying to kind of get back into Saints Row the Third, and it's weird to come back to that game now because a lot of it still works. There's bits and pieces of the humor that you look at now and go like, okay. And I don't know that I think the remaster is especially great.
For what reason? Because some people are like freaking out about that thing, going like, it's one of the best remasters ever. They've updated everything.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. Okay, they updated everything. I just don't think a lot of it looks great. So, like, they changed a lot of the models and stuff like that. It's $40, and so I think for that price, for the work they've done, all that stuff, like, I don't know that I agree that it's like. It's crazy, like it's weird. I think the standout thing about it is that it's weird that they did a lot of work to it, because it's like, here's this game that's not that old in the grand scheme of things. I feel like we've gotten pretty used to bad ports of Saints Row games over this generation. They did that version of Saints Row 4 that was rough.
Yes, the original Saints Row 4 was bad on the 360 from what I remember.
Yes, yeah, and even Saints Row the Third didn't run amazing on that generation of consoles. The PC version ran pretty well, but anyway, so it's like they put HDR in it and all that other stuff. So it's like they did work to it, and it looks fine. Like it's not. I don't know. Like I'm
told they updated something.
Not falling all over myself about how amazing it looks. Instead, I'm playing and going like, it's okay. It's
weird they did the work. If you're like inspecting kind of close up, those textures are pretty good looking. But for the most part, they don't really come through, I guess, because everything.
I was told
and the frame rate, I think
4,000 objects or something like that.
Okay, well, I think the frame rate kind of sucks, and I've played it on PC since as well, and even then, it just doesn't. I don't know. It's on console. It ships with the frame rate locked to 30, even on the step up consoles, and you can unlock it. It does, but it does not unlock it to an acceptable rate. So it just, I don't know. Yeah, it just didn't look. It did not run super well. And I think that artistically, some of the stuff they've done to the models and stuff like that, it just looks off. I don't know. It's fine, but whatever. To me, the interesting thing is like going back and revisiting that game, with all that's happened to open world games, over this decade.
Yeah, that was
right?
my real question.
Yeah,
because I remember it being like just kind of okay, fine, whatever in that respect to begin with. Like it's fine, but
well, it was one of those in an era when we were very much becoming done with that style of open world game. Like it's very much like, hey, we're trying to cap off this era of Grand Theft Auto before GTA 5 kind of became what it was and did things differently. Even GTA 4, it like, to me, Saints Row the Third feels like the super, like the culmination of years of the Grand Theft Auto 3 trilogy and all of the knockoffs of that, and even the previous Saints Row games to a certain extent, which did that in a different way. Like Saints Row the Third feels like the version of that where they've figured out like, okay, here's what we want to do. It's a little bit of everything, and we've streamlined some bits and pieces of it, but also it's got a bunch of side missions that are just fucking turret sequences, and right. You do them over and over again, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, like so it's stuff that like
the core of the game is still like a jack a car, drive to a place, shoot some guys, done. Right,
1000%. Yeah, but it does it with a little more panache. Panache and such.
Become a toilet at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. And so like the goofball nature of that game, I think still works pretty well.
Sure.
And it's weird now because here we are all these years later, where like that style of open world game isn't what they're making anymore. Like everyone, around that era or not long after, they kind of said like, okay, we can't do this anymore. We need to figure out different ways of doing things. You know, you had Assassin's Creed stepping away from its formula to find a new formula and all that sort of stuff. Even GTA, of course, you know, as at least, you know, changed up a lot of the things about it, or hidden it better than, you know, map full of icons and no point to any of it. And so it's like this weird, quaint thing that harkens back to a simpler time for the open world game, where it was just like, yeah, we rammed a billion different side activities into this, and we're not going to say they're fun, but we are going to say there's a whole lot of missions.
There's
in this
a lot
game.
of them, right?
And,
were they still gating access to new parts of the map or even new story missions? And like, remember the rep system and all that stuff? Did that game still have
right?
That?
So I think Saints Row 4 was worse about gating access to story missions based on you leveling up, but I want to say there is some of that in this game as well. It's been a long time, and you know, I've only played a handful of hours on PS4, and then went back and started over on PC. So I've kind of played the beginning of that game a couple of times recently. So I haven't gotten deep enough to see like where the gating is and stuff like that. But if I remember correctly, you do eventually get to a point where you're like, I guess I got to go do a bunch of side shit in order to unlock the next stuff. And I remember that being maybe like not amazing, but like I think, you know, that's the thing about that game is it goes for it in ways that games certainly didn't then, and in a lot of ways don't now. And I really appreciate that about it still. And I think like a lot of the humor still lands. And that was surprising. I think you have to look at it and go like, this is like maybe like 20% more corny than it was then. It was like riding a line then, and riding it really well. And I think just by nature of how society has changed, it's riding it a little less well now. So you kind of have to take that into account. But I think a lot of that stuff still works, and it's still a fun game to play, and still just, you know, if you're into, I guess, what we would almost even call an old school open world game at this point, like I think it does that really well.
I mean, it does have the aspect. I guess 4 was better or more extreme about this, but it turns into kind of full on, right, like power fantasy at some point, right? Like
superhero,
you get
stuff.
so leveled up that you're just like mowing down 30 guys at a time.
And even at the beginning of that game, so that's kind of the weird thing about this package is it's got all the DLC and all the stuff. And I wish games were better about finding ways to give you this stuff. So you start that game with like in your garage, you've got 10 different cars and tanks and all these murder vehicles that you can just pull right out for the first mission. And it totally changes the balance of power for the early game. And a bunch of weapons too. You get a gun, you know, a shotgun that shoots mollusks and just like all this dumb shit. But you're starting the game with explosive weapons, which you didn't do originally. And I think that you kind of have to, and it doesn't ever point out, hey, this is only here because the DLC was here. And if you played this game back in 2011 at launch, you didn't have any of this stuff. Like, they don't do a great job of denoting like, hey, you super would not have any of this bullshit if you were playing this game for real. And I kind of wish that there was a better way to kind of turn some of that stuff off, or like when you start the game, have it say like, hey, do you want to start with all the stuff, or do you want to like unlock all those things when you beat the story, or when you get to 10 hours, some chunk of time, or just go back into a menu and unlock it later, or
even just
something like
icon.
that.
Like an icon next to the DLC items would kind of be enough, right?
Right. They would be like, hey, this thing is crazy. Like these are vehicles you're not supposed to have. Like I think that would be maybe that would be enough. But whatever, they licensed they seem to have licensed all the music.
Okay.
It has that Kanye West song in it, so
there we go.
It's pretty good. It's a really great use of that song.
You got that far in? I feel like I remember that.
That's like the third fucking mission in the game. Really? It's crazy. Like I don't remember that being that early on.
In my memory,
like
that's like
second
pretty
thing
deep.
you do.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the second thing you do in that game is parachute out onto that penthouse and gun all those gangsters down.
All right. So if I were to ask you of what you've replayed so far, what lands the worst? What comes to mind?
So I haven't gotten in deep enough to do like any of like the pimp stuff again. And I bet it would be. I bet it would be some of the stuff around that storyline that you'd be like, but like the doofy bit where you and Pierce sing that fucking shitty Sublime song is still in there. You know, like like that. I had forgotten that was in there at all, but also that it was that early on in the game. Like, game seems kind of front loaded almost. And it's another like a moment you look at and go like, wow, fuck, this is crazy. Like games, you know, open world games didn't do that sort of stuff that well, and it just felt it makes the game feel so personable, and it has a heart that I think a lot of open world games didn't have then, and I think the stuff we've seen since then, it doesn't. It's that game feels like it was fun, and that the people making it or writing it were like having fun doing so.
Sure.
And I think that still shines through in a way that I guess I didn't immediately expect. And so like I'm, you know, despite like the controls not feeling great and some aspects of the pacing and stuff like that, like I kind of want to play through that game again. It's cool. It was the best game that came out that year.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good game.
So yeah, I don't know, that it's I'm excited. I'm happy that thing got a release that seems to kind of do it right, you know, that they did it right. I don't think it's like some amazing remaster, and I think $40 might be a bit much to ask for it.
Yeah, that sounds like they did a lot of work. Also, that you tell me, but that thing seems destined for Game Pass. Personally,
I wonder. Yeah, I bet at some point it ends up there. That's sooner or later probably ends up on some kind of service like that. That would make sense. That would be a much better buy. I
wonder if they'll do 4. I'm gonna say no. I feel like 4 was like 4 kind of came and went. I think as a like I mean yes, it's not as like you know, it didn't leave as deep an impression as 3 just because 3 was so out of left field. But like, you know, it's a pretty admirable follow up to that game in terms of some of the stuff they did with it. I feel like
totally like it's I mean them like their weird Mass Effect joke,
like
and
the ship is like a big part of that for me.
I think there's stuff in 4, like especially when you think about what Saints Row was before Saints Row the Third, and then think about what Saints Row 4 is in terms of like you getting warped into this simulation, like, you know, it leaves you, you know, traipsing through time, and like the nature of Saints Row 4 is so fucking over the top in a way that I think serves those characters and that story and what they did to it in Saints Row the Third, in a way that was like totally unexpected at the time, and I think just was really fascinating. You know, when you think about it breaking out of its shell as like, you know, a GTA ripoff or a GTA parody, you know.
I started to say it's kind of like the Scary Movie to
right
Theft Auto, except maybe it's a little better than that.
Yeah, but like, you know, but well, whatever. So I don't like those first 2 games. I think that like they like the idea of a parody of GTA where they're just like, we curse somewhat more. Like GTA is already meant to be satire, and it's meant to be funny in a lot of ways. So when the first Saints Row came out, it was just like, what the fuck are you doing?
That
like,
thing just definitely took itself a little seriously.
Yeah,
I do have some kind of fond memories of it though.
Yeah, it had. Well, you know, it did. There were a few things mechanically, if I remember right, that it did better than the GTA of its era.
It had that driving line.
Right. Yeah, and that was out before GTA 4 was out on 360. So it was like kind of like the first taste of a GTA like game on that generation of consoles. And so, yeah, I don't know, but like you know, there are people who swear by Saints Row 2, and I think they're wrong. I think that game
we got an email to that effect this week.
That game does jack shit for me. Like every time I go back and play it, or, you know, but oh, you got to mod it, and like I went back and tried to mod it and get back into it. I just think the storyline and the writing, basically, I think there's like that dividing line of like, if you really care about Johnny Gat, I don't want to talk to you about Saints Row. You know, like and because I feel like that stuff maybe got established there a little bit more, and then they did that awful Gat Out of Hell thing, that
DLC
thing that was just dumb. And so like I just have zero interest in that end of Saints Row. Like for me, like the third is where they broke out of that shell and started doing actually interesting things with it. And I think that's cool. So like you start to wonder, like if they're doing this much work for a remaster, like what does that mean for a fifth Saints Row? Like they had announced one at one point.
Did they come out like earnings
delayed
or something like that?
I forget.
I think somebody at like some corporate level was like, yes, we are working on a new Saints Row.
Yeah. So like,
God, where do you go with that? Like,
I don't
the
know,
fourth
man.
one, it was such a power fantasy that you were scraping the ceiling the entire time.
Right. You got like leaping over skyscrapers by the end of that game.
It was more of a crackdown at that point. It out crackdown in a lot of ways by the time you got there. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, like do you reground it and try to make it like a more realistic take? Because I don't think you can sit there and go like, oh, we're doubling down on this like weird simulation thing and all that sort of stuff. Like even from a story perspective, I think that wouldn't make a ton of sense. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder. Sure. Yeah.
Gangs of Mars.
Yeah. I mean, they did that. I think that's literally the Saints in Space DLC for 3 is pretty much that. So like all their weird tie-in with the Red Faction universe and stuff.
It's going to become Red Faction at some point.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to see, like, I think the thing I want to know most is like what a team working on a Saints Row game in 2020, what do they think Saints Row is? Like, what do they think are the core tenets of Saints Row that they're like, well, it's not a Saints Row game if we don't have, this, and this. Like, I'd be curious to know what that
list is. Yeah.
What that is, especially at this point.
They should parody that Martin Lawrence movie where he time travels back into medieval times.
Yep.
And just do that at Saints Row 5.
I think that's what the end of Saints Row. The end of Saints Row 4 was basically it's us with Joan of Arc or whatever.
It totally is like a time travel thing, right?
Yeah, like they uncover time travel at the end of that. Like in the ending, you don't actually do any of it unless the DLC gets into it. I don't remember, but yeah, they totally set that up.
Maybe that's why it was in my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's where they go.
Yeah, I don't have any sense of what Volition looks like at this point. Like Agents of Mayhem happened, and like that went over like it did. And at this point, I don't know who's still there or like what the.
Well, like didn't the narrative people end up at 343 working on Halo at some point?
Something like that. I think they definitely lost some people.
Yeah, I mean, that's natural. It's been a long time that you're going to have people moving on.
Yeah.
Especially after Agents of Mayhem, maybe. I don't know, but
comedy's hard, like it's tough to get that stuff right. And
in games, like it's damn near impossible. It seems, to actually have a funny game. Just because we've talked about it before, but like you can't time, like getting the timing of a joke down in an interactive thing, I think makes it way harder, or you're just telling jokes in cutscenes and it is what it is. So yeah, I think they did really well in Saints Row 3 at like actually crafting a funny game, and 4 I think is still funny. Like, it is not as surprising. I guess whatever from a gameplay and what they do with it on that side, I think they actually do pretty well.
Some of the like the Mass Effect ship stuff and the crackdown abilities and something, but at the same time they definitely went back to the well a little bit here and there. Like when they roll the touch during the boss fight at the end or whatever, it's like look, I love the touch and I appreciate that you did this, but also like it's kind of the Aerosmith gag again.
Yeah, exactly. That's they definitely kind of did that before, but yeah, it's cool that that's out there. And yeah, I wonder if it would end up on Game Pass at some point. That'd be a heck of a deal.
That's the right way to play that, maybe.
Yeah. And